The date is September 7th, 1940. The skies over London are about to be filled with the hum of German engines and iron crosses. Throughout the day, bombers will pound the city, leaving 430 dead and a further 1,600 wounded. Wave upon wave of German medium bombers, such as the Ju-88, will deliver a fatal load. Wait a minute. No, pause. What is that?
That's the picture you requested.
No. What is that?
That's a Ju-88.
No, it's not.
Yeah, it is. Look at it.
Look at it? You look at it. First of all, it has a big red dot on it.
Okay.
That means it's Japanese, not German.
But, they were on the same team, so...
Ah, where did you say you were studying again? Oh, yeah, that would do it. Hello everyone, my name is the Flying Historian, and today we will be covering this oddly familiar looking Japanese aircraft from World War II, the Q1W1, as well as tackle an often overlooked aspect of naval warfare in the Pacific. So sit back, get comfy, and for reasons you'll certainly learn in this video, don't be on a Japanese cargo ship in the 1940s. The Kyushu Airplane Company was the primary aircraft manufacturer on the island of, you'll never guess it, Kyushu. Not super original, but on the bright side, it could have been much worse. Kyushu was a significant producer of naval trainer planes, although they are remembered primarily for the development of the strange pusher-type fighter, seldom. As they say, you never quite get to choose your legacy. Does suck to be remembered as the weird kid in school every reunion, though. Kyushu was actually known as Watanabe Ironworks prior to the 1940s. Fukuyo Watanabe started Watanabe Ironworks in 1886. His factory began manufacturing torpedo tubes and other naval parts in 1919 near the town of Fukuoka. Watanabe was a visionary and believed that airplanes would become quite important in warfare. The only other producers of airplanes on the island at the time were from the Sasebo Naval Arsenal, but their plant was very small. In this case, size does matter a little bit. Watanabe wished to invest in the production of such crafts, but struggled to secure enough funding to build a factory capable of doing so. Watanabe was able to build a factory to produce wheels for planes, but in 1929, the Japanese Navy would commission Watanabe Ironworks to manufacture full aircraft. With engineers and technical specialists supplied by the Navy, Watanabe was finally able to produce the plants necessary to build full planes, while also continuing the manufacturing of parts for the Navy and airplane wheels for both the Army and the Navy. Watanabe Ironworks would get their start by building reconnaissance float planes. Most prominently was their 1941 licensed development of the Aichi E-13A Jake reconnaissance aircraft. In October of 1943, the Kyushu Airplane Company would be formalized. The Kyushu Company, though, would not be hosting any mandatory quarterly pizza and appreciation parties for meeting quota. During 1943, they produced 12% of the total number of naval trainer planes and only 3% of the total combat aircraft. But let's back up a bit. After all, we are supposed to be learning about this. The aircraft began as an Imperial Japanese Naval Order in September 1942, designated as Navy Experimental 17C patrol plane. The specifications laid out by 17C were quite different from any previous patrol aircraft requested by the IJN before. The aircraft needed to be a 3-seat, long-endurance, low-speed aircraft, capable of launching attacks from a steep dive. And just like any good, totally understanding boss's final demand, the project needed to be completed quickly. This was no ordinary patrol aircraft. It was to be Japan's first specified anti-submarine patrol plane. Watanabe Ironworks took up the task soon after the request from the IJN was made. Lead designer Nojiri Kozo was assigned to the project. The design was quite straightforward. To help with production, Kozo simplified the design of the wing, giving it a constant taper at the leading and trailing edges. Interestingly, the canopy would share similarities with that of the Junkers Ju-88. In fact, that is the reason many stumble upon this plane, confusing it for a reskinned Ju-88. However, I was unable to find any evidence that the Ju-88 had any direct link to the design of the Q1W1's canopy. It could be a coincidence, and honestly guys, this is just a good visibility canopy, so I don't think it's far from the truth. Though the war had been going on for a while now, designers could have seen the Ju-88 in photographs. Germany was also known to share technology with their Japanese allies, so who knows. Engineer Kozo, tell us what you've prepared for the chefs. So today, chefs, I made the Kyushu Q1W Tokai. It's a land-based, twin-engined, anti-submarine patrol bomber, sautéed with just a pinch of crew at the front. My frenemy over there likes to call it the Lenora for some reason. He never calls any of my dishes the names I give them. Please enjoy. The Q1W's first flight occurred in September 1943 and was reported to have pleasant handling characteristics. The aircraft also met all of the Navy's requirements set out by 17C. With that, production of the Q1W1 Tokai Model 11 was authorized in the spring of 1944. The Q1W1 would be introduced into service starting in January of 1945. But you can like and subscribe today. It's totally free, super fast, and would get us closer to crossing that finish line. If you like my content, also go check out some of my other videos. Plus, if you watch till the end, you'll get a sneak peek at the next video I'm working on. Okay, the Tokai. There were 4 variants, the Q1W, of which one was made and acted as the first working prototype, the Q1W1 Tokai Model 11, which was the production model, the Q1W2 Tokai Model 21, which was produced with a wooden tail surface and was built in small numbers. Finally, the Q1W1K Tokai Ren, which was an all-wood 4-seat trainer variant designed to train engineers on how to operate electronic equipment. Only one prototype was built. The aircraft had a crew of 3, 4 if you're special, was 39 feet long, with a 52-foot wingspan. Empty, it weighed around 6,839 pounds, and had a maximum takeoff weight of around 11,724 pounds. It was powered by 2 Hitachi GK2C Amakaze 31 9-cylinder air-cooled radial engines, rated at 610 horsepower each for takeoff, and 480 horsepower at 4,921 feet. It used 2 3-bladed variable pitch props. It had a max speed of 200 miles per hour at 4,396 feet, and a cruising speed of 150 miles per hour at 3,280 feet. It had a maximum range of 834 miles. Its service ceiling was 14,730 feet, with a rate of climb of 750 feet per minute. It was armed with one flexible, rearward-firing 7.7mm Type 92 machine gun, and 1 to 2 fixed, forward-firing 20mm Type 99 cannons in the nose. It was optional. Finally, it could carry 2 550-pound bombs or depth charges, which were carried on the wings. The aircraft was capable of using radar, a magnetic anomaly detection device, and radar-detecting antenna equipment. It is likely that it only ever carried 2 of these systems at any time, more likely to carry 1, and even more likely to carry none at all. So why build an anti-submarine aircraft like this so late in the war? Were submarines just not that much of a problem? Well, hi, editing historian here. I don't know if I make this really clear, so I will make the points here. Basically, submarines used in World War I definitely set a precedent for using them in the future, which is why other nations did start to produce their own submarines for their navies. However, aviation and technology still needed to catch up to this new upcoming war of World War II. Okay, alright, go. Many nations didn't really have a specific anti-submarine aircraft ready to go by the start of the war, instead substituting an equivalent like the PBY, but the second part of the question is often overlooked. During World War II, US subs mainly hunted in the deep, cold waters of the Pacific. Following the attack on Pearl Harbor, U.S. subs were given free rein to attack targets, a freedom which proved to play a pivotal role in disrupting and arguably crippling the Japanese warfighting capabilities. Though, U.S. subs had some major issues which greatly reduced their effectiveness at the start of the war. Some examples include archaic strategies like nighttime periscope attacks, inexperienced fear of enemy sonar capabilities, and the idea of hunting within a 500-mile radius of an enemy airbase being suicidal. These problems would diminish as reports on the success of German U-boats operating in the Atlantic reached U.S. sub-commanders, but the biggest obstacle for U.S. sub success were defective torpedoes. These torpedoes would sometimes run deeper than the keel of the ship, and the magnetic exploders on some were often defective, either exploding at the wrong time or not at all. All issues would be ironed out by the end of 1943, though. Regardless of their issues in the beginning, U.S. subs in the Pacific were massively successful. To give a better perspective on just how successful U.S. subs were in World War II, by the end of the war, U.S. subs would destroy 1,314 warships in the Pacific, representing 55% of all access ships lost. This would be achieved to the tune of only 52 subs lost. Despite the numbers to the contrary, Japan was not ignorant to the importance of anti-submarine warfare. Japanese High Command ordered the development of much of the technology needed to combat subs, such as sonar, radar, magnetic anomaly detection, echo ranging, ultra-high-frequency voice radio, a head-thrown rockets, Japan's version of the Hedgehog, and Joint Surface Air Doctrine. After seeing this list, one may wonder, why did Japan suffer so greatly against American subs? Well, that's because we are just good. Yeah, get good, Japan. Skill issue. No, it wasn't that. Japan was one thing out on the streets. They were totally different in the sheets. In practice, a lack of production and necessary materials, a lack of adequate training on the use and maintenance of devices, and a lack of resources to perform new doctrines successfully, mostly planes, especially toward the end of the war, led to a huge gap between what was prepared for and what happened. Training played a big role in Japan's lack of practical preparedness. For much of the war before 1942, Japanese bomber and torpedo pilots, as well as naval personnel, did not need to rely on these new technologies, as their enemy commonly had nothing to counter the industrial power of Japan. This meant that Japanese veteran warfighters could not help train incoming troops using experience-based training. Other issues mostly included a vibe of old habits die hard. Pilots and seamen heavily relied on naked eye spotting, even when other tools were available. Examples of this reliance can even be seen physically in the construction and modernization of their ships, like the huge pagoda masks on their vessels, and the lack of equipment on many escort ships. Okay, let's get a little more action going here. If you are looking to bring honor to your family and the Emperor by sinking an American sub, it's important to understand how they typically operate, and what are the best weapons to use against them. Your weapons of choice for this kind of operation are going to be the torpedo or the depth charge. I'm sure most of you are aware of the famous Nakajima B-5N Kate torpedo bomber, or perhaps the unique gull-winged Aichi B-7A2 Grace. Torpedo bombers played a huge role for both sides during the Pacific Theater, but when it comes to anti-submarine work, the torpedo was the less than helpful weapon for the job. Japan used the Type 91 torpedo, an extremely effective weapon when a hit was made. This is much easier said than done. Even with the element of surprise, and starting at close quarters, hitting targets as big as a battleship was still difficult. With that knowledge, I bet you can imagine just how tough it was to hit a submerged target with a non-tracking weapon using only the math in your head and the experience you have. Nah, not the best.
Yeah, boy.
The Army and Navy had 3 aerial depth bombs specifically for anti-submarine work. Yeah, it's a rare medical condition, don't worry about it too much. These bombs were considerably more explosive than typical bombs. Want to create a lot of pressure underwater, that's what is actually going to sink a sub. Anyway, starting with the smallest first, we have the 132-pound, 85 pounds of explosives, Type 99, Number 6, Mark II, Mod 0 and 1. These were the primary bomb used during patrol and had an explosive range of 12 to 15 feet. Then there is the 396-pound, 308 pounds of explosives, Experimental 19 Mark II with an explosive range of 25 feet. These were used primarily with medium bombers equipped with MADs. Finally, there is the 551-pound, 317 pounds of explosives, Type 1, Number 25, Mark II, Model 1, Mod 0 and 1, with a lethal range of 33 feet, and was only employed when a contact had been made by multiple surface and/or aerial allies. All 3 depth charges used timed fuses rather than hydrostatic or electronic ones, and had to be adjusted on the ground prior to being loaded onto the aircraft. A timed depth could be 0 to 1.5 seconds, that's around 0 to 50 feet, or a surface target, 3.5 seconds, which is about 80 feet, or 17 seconds, which is about 300 feet, the max depth on most US subs at the time. These changes could not be made while in air, which limited a pilot's ability to strike their target sometimes. Naturally, a standard set of fuses were used for readiness purposes. Bombs that were typically carried were preset to around 82 feet or 145 feet. The Japanese would often carry a variety of different loadouts that would consist of both Army and Navy depth charges. When naval depth charges were not available, the IJN would use the Army's 50 kilogram, 100 kilogram, or 250 kilogram bombs. Although being the most useful weapon for destroying subs in the Japanese arsenal, the depth charge did not see much technological improvements throughout the war. In fact, following the war, it was found that many more US subs would have been lost if Japan had the ability to produce depth charges that did not rely on timed fuses, as many of the close calls reported by the US subs stated that Japanese depth charges would often go off too early. So now that we know about Japan's depth charges, the next problem is how one uses the darn things. Unlike with a surface target, such as a ship, hitting a sub you can't well see is an issue. And that's not mentioning, generally, one has to find a sub before an attack can even really begin. The Japanese recognized the importance of radar and small search technologies. However, they were produced in small numbers, and pilots were generally ill-trained in their use. There were few successes reported by pilots who used their onboard radar to find and attack a target. The Indian on YouTube teaching us all math and science hadn't really been invented quite yet, which was probably the root of this issue. Aerial radar was first used on medium bombers, such as the Mitsubishi G4M Betty, starting around September 1943. Large-scale use of radar-equipped aircraft for anti-submarine operations did not occur until the fall of 1944. Probably not the late-inning comeback strat the Japanese thought it'd be. In reality, there were a multitude of reasons as to why it took Japan so long to use aircraft as a tool against the sub-menace decimating their supply fleet. Japanese onboard radar was reported to be capable of finding surfaced targets up to 12 miles away. Great, but Japanese doctrine handicapped itself, limiting the use of radar for night operations or during low visibility. Many commanders still considered visual search to be more reliable. This would change by the end of the war, as Japanese aircraft equipped with radar were making numerous contacts with US subs. Despite this, few attacks were made against those subs, as the same aircraft that found them commonly lacked guns or significant ordnance. Medium bombers capable of carrying more explosives and had a radar were easy prey for Allied fighters at the time, so rarely would be sent outside the bounds of the Japanese home islands. The Japanese did employ radar detection receivers onto some of their designated anti-sub aircraft by 1945. They stated that they did not use the tech very often or get to the point where they could triangulate where US subs were using the system. However, US after-war reports indicate that the Japanese had some success using the technology, but most likely used it to find contacts initially before switching to the aerial radar system to find the target precisely. The most relied upon anti-submarine system used by the Japanese was their magnetic airborne detection device. By late 1943, Japan had developed a MAD system of their own. By March 1944, Navy and Army designated anti-submarine aircraft were equipped with them. They had a reported range of 394 feet under average conditions and 820 feet under ideal conditions. Expert pilots were capable of flying just 30 to 40 feet above the waves, fully utilizing the devices. MAD devices were considered sufficiently reliable that any contact made by an aircraft equipped with MAD justified the deployment of additional surface or air units to search and destroy. Aircraft typically equipped with MAD were the Mitsubishi G3M Nell, Aichi E-13A Jake, Nakajima B-5N Kate, Nakajima B-6N Jill, Nakajima E-8N Dave, the Mitsubishi G4M Betty, Mitsubishi A6M Zeke, and the Kawanishi H8K Emily. The typical role of MAD-equipped aircraft would be to perform sweeps ahead of convoys, or to further confirm a submarine contact made by another unit. Although Japanese strategy intended for MAD-equipped aircraft to also regularly sweep heavily trafficked shipping lanes, a lack of aircraft, a lack of MAD devices, and the lack of adequate aerial superiority resulted in the success seen by US submarines against supply routes in the Pacific. To give a little additional perspective on how daunting of a task it would be for the Japanese pilots to be successful against American subs, take a look here. By the end of the war, only about 1/3 of all shore-based anti-sub aircraft had a MAD, 1/3 had radar, and very few had both. The end of the war seemed like an unbeatable dragon to the Japanese, who were throwing everything they could at the Americans, if not at the very least to slow them down. The Q1W1 was given a very important role in the effort, but was made in relatively few numbers. It was hard to pin down why the production rate was so low, but neither the production rate nor the fluctuation in staffing throughout the latter years of the war concerned Japanese high command. The only project the JHC really had their hands in at the Kyushu Airplane Company was the Shinden, and that came later. Starting around December 1944, attacks on the home islands became more prominent. Plans were enacted to spread the production arms of the company throughout the area, hiding them in small, sheltered spaces. Although this was done successfully without disrupting production by a significant margin, the Kyushu company was never attacked. Tokais operated from bases in Japan, Formosa, and China, with the primary mission of protecting vital convoys bringing badly needed raw material from the Netherlands, East Indies, and Malaya. Q1W1s were to be fitted with a new, small search radar. However, due to a delay in production, the larger Type 3 radar was equipped to help assist crews. Q1W1s were also fitted with MAD devices. In another life, the Tokai may have been a wonderful airplane, but in the hostile late-war Pacific skies, the Q1W1 suffered tremendously. They were very slow, and lacked in the defensive department. They were like an old person in a wheelchair with an open briefcase of money in the dead of night in the middle of the bad part of LA, armed only with a broken toothbrush shiv made of papier-mâché. In other words, they were easy pickings for Allied fighters.
So long, Emily.
Similar issues could be seen in their offensive armament too. They may have been able to find submarines, but they typically didn't fly with the 20mm forward-facing cannons, and weren't armed with forward-facing guns at all. They also could only carry 2 of the small 60kg or 180kg depth charges. They just weren't very effective at destroying American subs after they had found them. They were loyal as I'll be, serving until the very end. Interestingly, you might see an example of this plane without props. That is because many of the images we have of the Q1W1 were taken after Allied occupation of Japan. Many of Japan's warplanes had their props removed following Japan's surrender to prevent their use in any sort of post-war revenge attack. 4 Q1W1s were sent to the US for flight tests and post-war evaluations in 1945. Ultimately, all 4 would be scrapped in the early 1950s, having served their purpose for both nations. So, the question now remains, what happened? Only around 153 were built between September 1943 and August 1945. Typically, Japan built their purpose-built aircraft in the thousands. The Betty, the Kate, the Zero, just as an example. 153 aircraft to join an already small number of planes to tackle the serious problem of American subs was never going to be enough, even if Kyushu had started building them in 1939. The rate of production was just too slow. This was true across the board. Companies started too late or built aircraft in too few numbers to fight against American subs. At the same time Kyushu was building the Q1W1, they were also building the Q3W1 Tokai, South Sea, an anti-submarine torpedo bomber derived from their bomber trainer, the K-11W1. It saw very, very little service. Mitsubishi was designing a heavy anti-sub torpedo bomber named the Q2M1 Taiyo, derived from the Ki-67 Hiryu Peggy. It never got past the on-paper stage. Efforts to defeat US subs from the air just came too late and in far too few numbers. The plane itself also lacked the sufficient speed and armament in the late war era to effectively defend itself from Allied fighters, avoid flak from ships, and successfully attack American subs and sink them. All of these factors also made them not great as patrol aircraft either. I mean, most didn't even have a radar or MAD device due to shortages, so add that to the pile too. I use the term their time when describing Axis powers and their late war efforts to either turn the tide or to give them more time. I want to make a video on this concept later since many have asked for it, but for now, the Q1W1, specifically their use until the very end of the war, is an example of Japan's time, a desperate flailing against the inevitable. I think this is a great example of another forgotten project that relates to a genuinely important and I think rarely spoken about topic, that being Japan's war against US submarines. And I don't know who still needs to hear this, but it's not a Ju-88 in disguise. Doesn't even have the same job. Get it out of here. Now, before you go, stick to the end for a sneak peek on the next topic that we're going to be covering. Hello! Thank you for watching this whole video. That's awesome, always. If you want that sneak peek, then here you go. I'll be working on this. I don't think it's going to take me very long, so just be on the lookout for that. If you like my content, please consider liking, subscribing, comments, do all of the things. It really helps us out. We are so close to crossing that 1,000 subscriber threshold, and it would be just incredible if we were able to do that. So again, if you like what you see here, like, comment, subscribe, go check out some of my other videos. Some of them are really old, but I'm proud of them nonetheless. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys later.